I got sober when I was around 23-ish, and I had no idea who I was. So I had to learn how to become an adult and also learn who I was as a person, which was really difficult. As early as I remember, I think I was maybe 13 or 14 at the time, I remember very vividly actually, because it's just so absurd, that I took some oregano, I think, or some other leafy substance that wasn't marijuana, decided to roll it up in paper and then try to smoke it, which, as you can imagine, doesn't do anything. And I was hiding by my window in my bedroom doing this. I was like, this is interesting. But I don't know that I started using substances until I was probably 15, and I believe it really started with drinking. I would sneak alcohol from my parents or my grandparents. That led into, smoking marijuana. I was literally drinking and blacking out and ending up in places that I didn't know. Internally, I did a lot of comparisons to other people. And I would see things on social media and be like, I want to be like this person, or I got to be better than this person, rather than just being like, no, Ben, you're okay with yourself. And you're okay being you.
Green lights and blue skies are on their way. Yeah, they're on their way.
Welcome to Crosstalk. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Whatever you feel like commenting, let us know how we're doing or how you feel about something. I have Ben here today, and I've known Ben for a few years now, actually, but I don't know your story, so I'm really excited to hear it. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I always love talking about my story and hopefully inspiring others and helping them, educate them about recovery and the process that I went through personally. One thing I will say is that I think people always ask me, not I think, but I know people always ask me at my men's meeting about how much time I have. And while that is sometimes important, I think it is also important to highlight that each person has today, and that time is just a number and something that passes. And I always try to keep myself positioned in today, and always tell that to the new person entering into recovery at the meeting, is that you have today. I can't control what happened yesterday, and I really can't control what happens tomorrow. But what I can do is put my best foot forward and continue to try to live the principles that I've learned throughout recovery in my process. So I always like to start with that, because I can say that I have X number of years, which again, I think is a good fact and sometimes helps the person that's newly in recovery. But I also think we get caught up in the numbers sometimes. And
I agree.
That, it's just, I've seen a lot of people with, let's just say 5 or 10 years or 15 years. And unfortunately, they either go back out, or perhaps, yes, they are abstinent from drugs and alcohol, which is great. But I've also seen where, people then, kind of act out in their recovery in other ways.
Right, their process addictions.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot about that on here. Just a reminder, process addictions could look like shopping, gambling, shoplifting. What else? Sex addiction is a huge one. But people, those definitely show up once you put down the drink and drug.
Absolutely. And I'm no exception to that. I will say in the first, couple years through recovery, I was learning how to be an adult. I didn't know who I was. I got sober when I was around 23-ish, and I had no idea who I was. So I had to learn how to become an adult and also learn who I was as a person, which was really difficult. I masked everything with drugs and alcohol for a very long time, and that didn't give me the opportunity to grow. Right. The friendships that I did have were based on, I wouldn't call them lies, but just not really a friendship. So I had no idea how to do any of that. And again, I went through my own struggles through the early parts of my recovery and trying to figure out how to cope, but also how to live.
Right. Well, and thank you for saying that, because I think that knowing how to live in recovery and learning how to live, I should say, in recovery is kind of the battle, right? You at least for me, it was just a journey. I didn't know how to do anything sober. But I want you to first tell us kind of how it all began for you. Where did you grow up? Give us a little history. We kind of go through the process together, where it was, what happened, and what it, how did you get better, and what it looks like today.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I work in treatment now, so I could clinically dissect my entire process and,
Right.
how I ended up where I was in my early 20s and, compared to now. But what I'm going to try to do is just tell the story. And so my story starts with I was adopted when I was 8 months old from South Korea. My parents lived in southern Vermont at that time. And I quite honestly don't remember a lot from my childhood, but what I do remember is that my brother, when he was 2.5 years old, was adopted from Honduras.
Okay.
My parents were really, I don't want to say attracted to adopting him, but were wanted to support him because he was in a fire in Honduras, and he unfortunately had severe burn damage. And they wanted to be able to offer that support to him in the United States that he wasn't going to get in Honduras. That I share that because not to talk about necessarily his experience, but from an early age, the focus was primarily on him for the right reasons. He needed a lot of medical care and also had a lot of traumatic events from that fire and a lot of things to process. So. Again, I had a great childhood. I would always say that part of my parents tried the very best that they could. But, again, the focus was a lot on him when I was younger. So, again, my parents did the best they could. But, I remember going to a lot of medical appointments with him. We used to go to Shriners Hospital because he was an amputee, so he had to have prosthetics to help him walk. Wow. And also, to deal with the burns on his body. So, again, they offered him a lot of support and help. But what that meant for me was that, in a lot of ways, I was left in the back seat. Right. Ben's okay. Ben gets enough love, which, again, a lot of parts are true. But the focus from when I was early in age to when I was a teenager was all on him. I remember going to support him through therapy sessions and everything else. And again, a lot of focus was diverted to, what he needed, which again, I don't discount and don't think was the wrong thing to do.
Do you think they felt like you can take care of yourself because you don't, not yourself at 2, 3, 4, but you can handle more since you didn't have all these issues? Yeah,
absolutely. I think also one piece that I would add too is that, and my mom is in recovery today, but my mom was an active alcoholic. My grandparents were alcoholics. I don't know that they would call themselves alcoholics, but they certainly were. And when you look at it in today's settings, and my dad was also an alcoholic. Okay. So on top of, working with my brother on the medical needs that he needed here, I also had 2 alcoholic parents for a very long time. Again, I don't want to quote the age, but I think around 13, because I just can't remember specifically, my mom was able to get sober. My dad, unfortunately, never was able to get there.
Got it. That's hard.
So yeah, very tumultuous household, for lack of a better term.
So how did that affect you growing up in terms of in the older years, like when you were going to school and everything? What did that look like for you?
So that's a great question. One of the things that I remember is going to work at a very young age. My parents were very giving with what they had. At times they didn't have a lot, but other times, they did. My grandfather started a chain of restaurants and was able to pass along some of that to my dad and to us, which was really helpful and supportive. But I guess in part of my own independence, I should say, because there was so much focus on my brother, that I was able to, start really living independently, meaning getting jobs during the summertime, really working a lot, trying to self-sustain to some extent. I am proud to say that when I was 16, I bought my first car.
That's amazing.
And again, I was in southern Vermont at the time, so I went to a smaller schools just because the population isn't as high as in South Florida. Mm-hmm. So I did have a good group of friends around me. But yeah, I tended to do a lot of independent things, I guess I would put it that way.
Okay. Did you fit in well with the people around you? Was being adopted, did that affect you in any way in terms of, did you feel different?
So that's a great question too. So I didn't see that until probably later in life when I was able to process it on a more of a clinical and therapeutic level. Um, but yeah, growing up in southern Vermont, I was probably the only Asian person in the school in the area. And I think also, from my brother being from Honduras and me being from South Korea, we were different
Right.
in a lot of ways. Did I ever not feel accepted? I really can't say that I did for me personally. I feel like people were very accepting of me, and I never felt different. People actually would joke around when I was a kid that I looked Asian, but really had a very white childhood, for lack of a
Okay.
better term. And I don't mean that in any different way. It's just kind of the way that they kind of looked at my childhood and looked at the way that I learned things. You know.
Okay, so tell me more. What did your using start to look like? Where did you start in terms of that?
So as early as I remember, I think I was maybe 13 or 14 at the time. I remember very vividly, actually, because it's just so absurd, that I took some oregano, I think, or some other leafy substance that wasn't marijuana, and decided to roll it up in paper and then try to smoke it, which, as you can imagine, doesn't do anything. And I was hiding by my window in my bedroom doing this, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." But I don't know that I started using substances until I was probably 15, and I believe it really started with drinking. I would sneak alcohol from my parents or my grandparents, and that led into smoking marijuana. But my primarily it was drinking through a lot of my teen years, and one of the things in going or living in southern Vermont was that I guess there wasn't a lot to do, and that's probably actually not necessarily true, but that's my interpretation of what it was like when I was a kid. But we would be, some of the parents would let us go and, have parties, quote unquote. And, again, no disrespect to the parents or anything that was happening, because again, it was just that time, I guess. But we would go and we would drink, and as long as we didn't drive and as long as we put our keys in a basket or wherever, we would be able to, drink freely and do what we wanted to do, I guess, for lack of a better term.
That was very similar with where I grew up and how the parents kind of, maybe in the crowd I hung out with, I guess the parents felt that way.
Yeah.
As long as nobody drives, and they had taxi services, like the numbers on the refrigerator if we needed them. Beepers were a thing when I
Yeah.
grew up. So as long as you beeped someone when you got home, and everything. And then, so in high school, you're starting to do this. Did it look bad? Was it kind of normal kid behavior?
So I was I was an average student. I got by. I was definitely not an A plus student back then. I did just enough to get by, and I did, a couple sports. Living in southern Vermont, I did skiing. I did some sailing because there were lakes. My parents didn't want me to do soccer, so I'm not wearing glasses right now. I'm wearing contacts, but they didn't want me to play soccer because they were afraid that if I, did the head thing with the ball, that potentially would affect my eyesight. And I say that because, skiing and sailing are subjected to certain parts of the year. So then I would, do the partying or hanging out in my other spare time. So again, not that there wasn't a lack of things to do there, but I just felt that way to some respect. We would also go paintballing, which is the paintball guns and all that stuff. And because you have a lot of wooded areas, it made it a lot of fun. And I won't say this is a good thing, but then we would go and drink after. And fortunately, we wasn't drinking and using the paintball guns, but yeah, it seemed to me when I look back at it that we had a lot of spare time. A lot of idle time. Although that could be true for any young adult. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I think I felt that way too, but I started going into New York City at an early age because I lived next to New York. So, did you go off to college after high school?
I did. So the school I went to for high school was really proud that they were able to send all of their students off to college. And again, I probably felt conflicted at the time. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that, college was the next step. So I went to a school called Roger Williams University in Bristol, Rhode Island, so not too far from southern Vermont. And also during that time, my father got divorced and remarried to somebody who lived in Massachusetts, in Cape Cod specifically. So that was a good kind of middle ground where it wasn't too far from Vermont, it wasn't too far from Massachusetts, and it was by the water, which living in South Florida, it seems to me that I really love being by the water and by the beach. So I went there, and I thought my drinking was bad in high school. It was nothing compared to when I got to college and got around more people that wanted to party and do the same thing. And it really, unfortunately, took off from there.
So paint a picture for me.
So I had, and again, I've talked to people that aren't an alcoholic, and they're like, "What are you talking about, a blackout?" They're like, "I've never drinking that much that I've blacked out and not remember what happened." I'm like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, "Then I really am an alcoholic if that's something that you don't even know what the word is." But that happened maybe a couple times in high school. I mean, it happened probably. It's sad to say, and I'm not proud of it. Probably every weekend, if not every other weekend in college. And again, in the first couple of years of college, it was really drinking. There wasn't any other substance use, no other drug use. I was actually it's kind of funny because I ended up using the other substances, but I was very standoffish about drugs. I would see people doing cocaine and opiates and other things, and I was like, that's never going to be me. I am just a drinker. And keep in mind, like I was the drinker that blacked out, and then inevitably got to the other drugs. But
I was the same way. I was like, ugh, pot? I'll never do that. I don't want to be a pothead. But I didn't start smoking pot till I was 26, and cocaine, like, ugh, I would never do that. I said I would never do that to everything, and I think I did a lot. Yeah. There are a couple things I never did, but yeah, I was very. I scoffed, I guess is the word, at everything.
Yeah, that's a good word for it, because I did the exact same. I was like, that's never going to be me. Like, I would come home from, I think it was after my freshman year, I would come home and be like, there were all these rumors, quote unquote, of people that coming home and like they had experimented with different drugs in college, and they'd be like, yeah, that one does a lot of cocaine. And I was like, yeah, that's never gonna be me. Like, look at that person. Inevitably, I actually got there and was that person. But yeah, I just can't believe that I scoffed at all that. And to think that I was better then is just a fascinating thought, because I was literally drinking and blacking out and ending up in places that I didn't know. So essentially kind of the same thing in a lot of ways.
Well, now I can see that it is too, but I think back then drinking is so widely accepted. I always say this to people. It's funny because you know how when the doctor prescribes you something and people are like, oh, I'm not going to take that. It says liver damage and kidney damage. And I'm like, okay, have you ever looked up the side effects of alcohol? It's like cancer, death, psoriasis of the liver, not even damage. It takes you to like the extreme of everything. So it's just funny to me how, alcohol is so accepted, yet it's one of the worst things we could put in our bodies.
Oh, absolutely. And I see that working in the addiction field today is just how brutal alcohol can be on the body. I mean, we hear it today in the news and on social media that even what we thought was drinking okay, like different kinds of wines, I think it's red wine, is still not okay in a lot of ways. Yeah. Drinking beer and drinking hard liquor, there is no healthy component to that. And the way that I was drinking, I'm glad that I didn't, do a lot more damage to my liver or any other of my organs, because that was a possibility for sure. But I'll go back to I'll rewind a little bit in college. So either it was my sophomore or junior year, I can't remember. I was a 5-year bachelor's student, which we all know that you really should be graduating for. I was on the 5-year plan. But I think really one of the traumatic events that happened in college for me was, so I actually ended up on the local Fox News channel. It was either, again, my sophomore or junior year, but I had bought a used car from a dealership. I had, wrecked another car before that. And I was back in school, and I was driving back from dropping I think it was then girlfriend off at her school, which is about 20 minutes away. I was, and I don't endorse this whatsoever, I was somewhat intoxicated, and I got pulled over. So originally I thought I was getting pulled over for, a DUI or suspicion of, something. And when I pulled over, the cops had their guns drawn and said, don't move, put your hands on the wheel. And, immediately then it hit me. This wasn't a normal traffic stop. Come to find out is that the VIN on the car was registered as stolen out of the state of Rhode Island. And for those of you that don't know, in possession of a stolen vehicle I think it's a Class A felony.
Oh, wow.
And they consider it a dangerous traffic stop. That's probably not the right word, but their feelings on stolen cars is that if you stole it from somebody, you're probably dangerous to some extent. So what happened was, because it was a Class A felony, is I went to prison. I went to jail for that night, and also then the next morning had to go in front of a judge and be handcuffed to a bunch of other, for lack of a better term, felons, and have to go in front of the judge. And knowing inside that, I bought this car from what I thought was a reputable dealer, it turns out that it was. There was just some paperwork errors. But being handcuffed to a bunch of other felons in front of a judge for not doing anything that was actually wrong was pretty horrible. And I remember, my dad picking me up and being like, what happened? And I didn't have any answers. I didn't know what to do. I think I actually probably went the same day after he dropped me off back at school, and probably drank. And, lo and behold, again, all of those things were false. Fox News, the local Fox News channel, actually interviewed me on my college campus about the incident, and it just
What did you
just
say
really
on
was
the news?
unfortunate. I think again I was kind of blown away by the entire scenario. Actually, one of my college friends, their dad was an attorney, and he was able to get all of the charges dropped, and actually thrown off my record or concealed off my record, so they'll never show up again because they were illegitimate. But I just remember how traumatic that event was, being in a car, with everyone and their guns drawn, and then being handcuffed to a bunch of other felons for something, again, that I didn't do, was probably the turning point in where my drinking got really, really bad and where the drug use entered. And I can say that today. I probably didn't realize it at the time, to be fair. But yeah, it really got bad after that.
So tell me a little bit about, what that looked like. What does bad mean to you? I guess I should say.
So I started not going to class, or going to class very little. I started with the things that I never thought I would, with cocaine and opiates and other substances. And, my life got really unmanageable really quick. I think, again, another turning point was in the same car that I got pulled over in. I got into an accident. I didn't, not with another car. Actually, it's funny now. It wasn't funny at the time, with a curb. And I slid into the curb and I guess broke the axle or whatever. And, they breathalyzed me and I was, over the legal limit. So I did go to jail for that. But that didn't stop me. I remember the next morning, I was released on my own recognizance from the jail, told what my court hearings were. And then I literally, not 2 hours after being released from the jail, went and drank to forget about what happened. I think at that end of that semester, my parents said, enough is enough. You need to take a semester off, clean up your act, which to some extent I think I did for a time period. And then I went back to school.
Did you go to a rehab? What is cleaning up your act? I mean, what is that?
So at that point in time, no treatment. Again, my dad was still an active alcoholic then. He really believed that I could do it myself and just clean up my act, or at least some form of controlled drinking, and probably leave all the other substances alone. And again, I think I did pretty well for a time period. Then I went back to college. I didn't drink. But I did. It's not. It's not funny, but looking back, it's a little funny. I managed to also get a prescription for Adderall during that time. So in my manipulative ways, in my 6 months off from college, and again, maybe I do have ADHD, maybe I don't. I think everyone probably has a little form of it. But I was able to get a diagnosis from testing that I had ADHD. Then I was able to then go to my primary care physician at the time to get Adderall, which, again, probably was a substitute for the drinking. It wasn't, I wasn't actually going away from substances. I was just replacing it with something else.
Right.
So 6 months later, I go back to school. I'm on Adderall prescriptions, and I'm not drinking, but I'm taking the Adderall. And probably at some extent, it turned into abusing the Adderall.
Right.
And that only, again, when I was back in college, probably lasted a couple months. And then I was doing all of the things that I said that I wouldn't do again.
Right. Well, because you didn't really do any work on yourself. You just...
Yeah. Just substituted, basically.
Yeah. Addiction interaction type of thing.
And I was like, oh, well, let me get some testing so that I can prove to everybody that there's something wrong with me and that I need some other substance to help me, which, again, I find out later down the road is not the case. But fast forward, I'm on year 5. I'm coming to the end of it. I think it's July or June of that year. And I'm 2 classes short. I know that. But they, when you're that close, they let you walk at graduation, which I did. I was probably under the influence, if I remember correctly. But I remember feeling like a pit in the bottom of my stomach and feeling like, wow, I'm the guy that's walking across the stage who isn't actually getting the diploma. They actually hand you an empty leather thing that's supposed to have your diploma in it, but because I didn't have all the credits, there was nothing in there.
Right.
And just feeling pretty down about myself and being like, wow, I spent 5 years in college. My parents were gracious enough to pay for my college, and this is what I have to show for it. And shortly thereafter, I did tell my family that, again, I was not doing well. I think they were pretty, I don't think they were fooled by all my tricks. And
did you go back and get those credits, or did you tell them you're not doing well before that?
So I didn't go back at the time.
Okay.
I lasted probably a month at home, if that. My parents saw how, not how dysfunctional I was crossing the stage and just my affect. I think I actually had to leave. We had this nice dinner with all of our friends, and I couldn't even make it through that.
Right.
And so about a month at home, give or take a little bit, I decided that, to come clean to my family and say, I need to go to treatment. So my family did some research, and they landed on Karen. And probably a couple days after that, we drove to Warnersville, Pennsylvania.
You got to go to Pennsylvania.
From Chatham, Massachusetts, yep. I don't really remember the ride. I do remember being like, oh, what am I doing? And I remember starting to get into Pennsylvania, and I've not really been to Pennsylvania, to be honest, especially Warnersville, and driving up the mountain and being like, what did I get myself into? And back then, they didn't have NEAG, which is a beautiful detox facility today. They had this little, I don't want to call it a cabin. I think it's where they have some offices today, but this place with double beds with a nursing station, but again, not as nice as NEAG or Keel Center today. And I'm being like, wow, this is where I'm going to detox? This is so strange. I'm in the middle of nowhere on a mountaintop in a place that I don't even know how I would leave if I needed to. Mm-hmm. But that being said, the best decision I could have ever made in my life was that day. That was a turning point.
So you willingly went?
Yep.
You did. Okay.
Yeah.
But then obviously I did the same thing. I said yes, but then on the plane I was like, wait, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Why did I say yes?
Yeah.
But I didn't get to go to PA. I went straight to Florida.
Which in some ways isn't necessarily, in my opinion, a bad thing. One of the things that I always share in my story is that Pennsylvania taught me how to love myself. We go to chapel, and back then I went to what's called, and they still have it today, the Young Adult Male Program. But back then it was really full all the time, and I met lots of younger men there. But they were really loving in Pennsylvania. They were like, here's all the things you can do. They had a cafeteria, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but, to me back then it was. And you got to do all these things. And to your point, 30 days after being in Pennsylvania, they gave me an option. They could go to this other place in Pennsylvania. And again, I think I had probably had enough of Pennsylvania at that point in time. Or I could go to South Florida. And they're like, it's beautiful. There's beaches there. There's a pool. I'm like, this sounds amazing. I get down there. And this is where I'm getting to what you were talking about is 6 of my quote unquote friends that I met up at Yamp were all sent to the same place in Florida. And they all had AMA'd. And I'm like, I get there and I'm like, where are all my friends? Where are all the guys that I know? They're like, yeah, they left. I'm like, oh. Okay. That's good. Thinking to myself, I wonder why they left. And I was actually came down with another gentleman that I knew up in the young adult male program in Pennsylvania, came down with me to Florida, and they picked us up in a town car. Like, it just seemed so fancy. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, because I was really entitled back then too. I'm like, oh yeah, this is like going to be the same thing. I get in there. Nope, it is not. They gave me a hamper. They gave me some sheets. I go into again, don't get me wrong. The apartments were nice. But it was not the same experience that I had up in Pennsylvania. And
what was it like?
I think reality hit. Shopping for myself. There was no cafeteria.
Just people don't really know what.
Sure.
So just explain kind of as if you're talking to someone who has no idea what you're talking about, what shopping means.
Absolutely. So, how I talked about the dining hall or the cafeteria up in Pennsylvania? You could go in, get whatever you wanted. You could eat whatever you want, eat as much as you'd like. So when I got to Florida, they gave me that hamper with the sheets in it. They said, you have, I can't remember what it was at the time, maybe $70 on a Publix gift card. And they're like, that's $70. You pay for your cigarettes, which I smoked at the time, and you pay for your food for the week. And that's it. There was no other money. There was no other spending. And again, I was personally broke at the time, so I didn't really have anything else to spend anyway. But they're like, that's it. I was like, that's it? Because in Pennsylvania, they would give you lozenges to get you over. Like, there wasn't like a, fixed amount of money you could spend or whatever. So I had to learn how to budget. And again, I was familiar with some of that from working as long as I did, but again, didn't really have to do that in recent times. And then how to figure out how to live with other people. So in Pennsylvania, if my memory serves me correct, I lived with one other person. Down here at the time, I lived with at least 2 or 3 other people, sharing an apartment, sharing a refrigerator, sharing a stove. The experience was far different in that also there were a lot of directives. So again, up there, you'd be like, yeah, you can go to group, you talk about your feelings. I would go to group in Florida, and it was talk about your feelings, but we're also going to tell you everything that you did wrong. And everything that you were doing to hurt your family, hurting yourself, hurting everyone around you. And guess what? You're going to make some changes, or your family's not going to talk to you. Your family's not going to support you in any of your endeavors, both financially or emotionally, if you choose to go the other route. And you're going to be here for a very long time. I was like, oh, good. And again, I was really young at the time, early 20s.
I call it confrontational treatment.
Yes.
I don't know if that's a real thing, but that's what I call it.
Yep. And back then they had therapeutic leaves. So again, you weren't doing the right thing. You weren't following directions. Guess what? You were packing your stuff on a Friday. You were going out to figure out where you're going to live, whether that be with sober supports or at the beach or on a bench for that matter. And you were going to figure it out. And then you were going to come back Monday morning and advocate why you should come back. And if your advocation wasn't strong enough, guess what? You were back out there figuring out how to advocate stronger the next time they would let you come back to clinicals to do that. So I think that also put the fear of God into me and saying, I don't want to be sleeping on a beach or on a bench. I don't have much. So I'm going to try to follow everything as best I can and try to do everything that they're telling me to do, as hard as it is. So again, a very different experience. Looking back at it today, very grateful. One of the things that I really remember is Family Week 2. Mm-hmm. So I think it was 2 months into and I stayed longer than 84 days.
Right.
Than is the recommended time when I was in Pennsylvania. But family week was probably on month 2, and I remember my family coming down and them getting really addressed heavily by the clinical team there, and my dad not liking it. So keep in mind, my dad was still an active alcoholic at that time. He didn't really want to address anything that had to do with him. Again, much like my brother in my early childhood, it was easier to kind of deflect on, my brother has these issues going on. Let's work with him on what he needs. Ben has these issues now that have surfaced in his early 20s. Let's work on that. He, again, stayed through family week. From what I understand, and he never told me directly, but after that family week, he never returned a call from the clinical staff after that.
Oh.
He did not like that he had to actually go back and do some of his own work. And it wasn't just a Ben thing or a Ben process.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So that was hard. But I think they would call me as a relatively, what is it called? Not floating through, but like under the radar patient. I didn't really do anything that caused a lot of attention. I tried to follow direction as much as possible. And again, back then there were a lot more rules than there are today. Again, times have changed significantly in the time that's passed, but back then we couldn't chew tobacco. There was no gym, there was no working out, because again, they were fearful of the cross addiction part of, switching to, working out excessively. But yeah, it was a lot more strict back then. Best thing for me, but yeah. I remember the day that I moved out, I was recommended to go to a halfway house, but I moved in with one of the people I knew from treatment. I don't recommend that. But it, seemingly worked out for the time period. And I remember being so excited with my hamper on my back. Like, I'm moving out. I'm good to go. Yeah, I moved into an apartment with 2 gentlemen that I knew from treatment who were actually in the same primary group, if I remember correctly.
Oh, Lord.
Yes. But again, not having much. I had some clothes, I think a suitcase of clothes. Karen really helped me in the vocational process on getting a local job. It was actually through another alumni that had been picking me up from the residence and taking me out on pass. I was able to get a local job. I think I made $12.50 an hour.
That's more than I made.
It wasn't bad. How much did you make?
I mean, and it's probably like 7, 8, 9 years later than you, but I made $11 an hour, and this was in, what year is this? It's in 2017, and I was making $11 an hour after I was like a real estate agent in New York, not, I don't know how much I was showing up, but my jobs basically in New York. But yeah, it was.
What was your first job?
Answering calls at a place that books massages and facials, and I had to answer and say, "May I book your massage or facial?" And I fought the team on it because I really was like, "No, I should go back into real estate or do something, a desk job or something that's going to take me somewhere." And they're like, "No, you need just a regular job that's not going to be stressful." And I fought them. Well, they kicked me out eventually, and I ended up getting that job because I needed something.
Yeah.
And it was the best. They were right. It was the best thing I did was because I was able to focus on my sobriety and just going to meetings, and I didn't have to stress about work or anything. But that paycheck did not get me far.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Even, again, not that 11 and 12 is very far from one apart, but yeah, I remember going to they had the dollar menu back then at Wendy's.
Oh.
They don't have it today.
Yeah.
But being like, what can I get? Like, how am I going to afford my rent? And again, I think my rent split between 3 different people was like $500, maybe it was less than that, $300 bucks a month. It was not much. We actually, I don't know how we did this. We got into a 55 plus community.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but the apartment was very nice. It did what we needed it to do. My friend and I, from the same primary group at this treatment facility, shared a bedroom. I was very jealous and envious at the time. So he had an actual mattress. I lived on an air mattress with some sheets that I think were actually from the treatment center. And I did that for quite a long time. And I had a $50 bicycle I bought from another guy in recovery.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to get around. My parents were very steadfast that, I needed to earn back. I had earned back in my car that they had paid for, which at the time I was pretty upset over, but today I understand that I literally paid nothing for the car, so they had every right to either sell
Right.
it or not give it back to me. So I was lucky to get it back. But I did that for a long time. I caught rides with people. I lived on an air mattress. I think that was actually, so I did get my car back, I think within a year, so that I could, go to my job and, pick people up from the treatment center. But
It's
I
very
did,
humbling, right?
yeah. But I lived on that air mattress for at least a couple years. I remember that. I just, $12 an hour, I just wasn't making enough money where I could go out and buy a mattress. I was focused on gas, insurance, food. And that was it. That's all I could afford.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember, that was, and I always share in my story that, while those times were tough, I always remember them today. I always will remember like waking up and be like, yep, I got to get on my bicycle and my khakis and go to my advertising job and do what I need to do and then bike back or catch a ride if it was raining. But yeah, those were humbling times for me. I also remember when I was at the treatment center riding the bus. I had never ridden the bus
Oh God.
ever.
I remember it too.
Except for in Rhode Island, I would ride the bus to, go to bars. But I mean, that's probably not the same experience. But riding public transportation and being like, wow.
And the bus in Florida may or may not come, at least in South Florida where we are. It's one of those things where I waited once for 2.5 hours on a Sunday to get back to the treatment center. I was dying of thirst. Oh my God, it was terrible. And I had to go to the bathroom and I actually went in the bushes on Federal Highway. And
Wow.
I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
There was nothing in the area. I was like, I'm not walking.
You got creative.
I did.
He had this van and he would come and pick us up and I'd be like, who is this guy? And again, I tell him this today at our men's meeting, but I'm like, who is this guy picking me up in his weird van? And I looked up to him, but I'm also like, at the same time, I'm like, do I want to be this guy with this weird van?
Right.
Like, is this what sobriety looks like? Guy with a weird van picking up people from a treatment center?
Might be better than a bicycle though, or the bus.
This van was a little
bad.
questionable.
Okay.
But I actually still go to the same men's meeting on Tuesdays with him today, and it's really awesome seeing where we were back then to where we are today. But back to what your original question was, is sticking with the people that I looked up to, that were doing the right thing. And I should specify men, because again, I was going a little crazy back then, again, trying to find myself, but also chasing after women, which is what's not recommended in the program. And, again, focusing on some things that probably weren't the best things to do, but sticking with the men really helped, and building those relationships, and also picking up the phone and calling when I was struggling and being like, hey, I need some help.
Right.
Or I don't know how to deal with the situation. And learning how to really reach out when things were bad, not just when things are, I guess, what is the old phrase? Like, people always will talk when things are good, but then not pick up the phone when things are bad.
Right.
And, are afraid to get vulnerable. But those are the things that really helped me early on.
Yeah, I think that picking up the phone is so important. It helped me from relapsing, actually. And I called women that I don't even remember who they were. It was just like Janet AA in my phone. And I may have met Janet last month, or I may have met Janet 3 years ago, and I wasn't sure, but I called Janet and she picked up. And some of them showed up. Others invited me to a meeting. It was just really cool to see how those 12-step fellowships work. And I also went to AA, and I met so many great women, and that phone, it was so heavy at first. I remember I was like, phone. I didn't even text people. I didn't anything. I just didn't communicate that way. It was either in person or not at all. And usually I was really late, or 3 days later communicating in person that, sorry, I'm late,
Yeah.
But that phone, it might be heavy at first, but it's really, really important, I think, for people.
Absolutely. Um, and in the same years, and I think, I always tell people too that I had more traumatic events happen in, my recovery process than I did when I was drinking. Which I think in some ways, again, I don't want anyone to necessarily go through the same things, but it did help me in my journey because it made me a stronger person, I think. So in 20, and again, I'm fuzzy on the dates just because I'm not good with dates and time sometimes. But I think in 2014 it was, my grandmother unfortunately passed away. She had Alzheimer's and dementia,
I'm
alcohol
sorry.
induced.
So sorry.
And I appreciate it. And then not even a year after, my father passed away. So my grandmother, I think, was in her late 70s. My dad, unfortunately, was 58 years old.
Wow, that's really young. I'm sorry.
Thank you. He was an alcoholic most all of his life, and he was also a heavy smoker. So he was diagnosed in maybe late 2014, early 2015. I can't remember exactly, but with stage 4 lung cancer, which is basically, looking back at it now, learning more about it, is a death sentence
Right.
that you're not going to recover. And unfortunately, my dad was so far in his alcoholism that, they told him to please stop drinking, obviously going through chemo and everything else, but he would still drink significantly. And the other one part I forgot to add about my treatment experience, thinking about my dad, was my dad, that I learned after the fact actually, was from my stepmom, is that my dad would, answer the phone when I was in treatment to support me, but then would turn around and drink beer until he passed out
Wow.
after speaking with me. And that's how progressive this disease is, and that even if you see your loved one going through it, it doesn't mean that you're going to change, unfortunately. But yeah, that was probably the hardest point in my sobriety and recovery journey, is that, my dad passing away. And not to mention, and this is part of the story too, is my dad was, I look now, working in the industry, I would probably call him a sex addict or a relationship or love addict. But he was actually living with another woman at the time who was not my stepmom, which made the situation even more convoluted. And yeah, I remember when and unfortunately I didn't make it home I knew my dad was not doing well. I had seen him for Christmas. I did not make it home to see him before he passed away. I was actually I was driving to West Palm to get on a flight to see him when I got the news.
Oh,
So I did not get to say goodbye, but in a lot of ways, I knew that the timing was inevitable. I just didn't know when.
right. Again, I'm so sorry. There's, nothing I can say that will,
I
you know.
appreciate it.
How did you cope with it?
So that's a good. So in recovery, it was a different experience. One of the things that I talked about back then, not so much now, but there wasn't a lot of my friend group who had gone through something similar, some kind of loss like that, which is a good thing, because I wouldn't want anyone else to have to go through that. But when I would talk about it, people would be really empathetic, which I appreciated, but no one had experienced that kind of loss, whether it be their mom, dad, etc. And there wasn't a lot of people to talk to about it. And my dad didn't have, I don't want to go into too many details, but he didn't have his will finalized and everything else, and it got really complicated dealing with an estate, being in recovery, dealing with, another woman, so to speak, living in this house, made it really complicated. And so, I remember smoking a lot of cigarettes. I remember not dealing with it very well. And plus, having your father die and then your grandmother die a year before that, and then having to deal with, all of this estate stuff that wasn't finalized, was just, I think, too much at the time. So I remember, and this is why I go back to what I originally said when we first started, is that I live it a day at a time, is that while I didn't pick up a drink or a drug, I certainly acted out back then in different ways that were not what a sober or person in recovery should do. And I'm not proud of the things that.
Would you be willing to talk about some of those things? You don't have
Sure.
to.
Yeah.
It just what does acting out but not picking up a drink mean, I guess?
Yeah,
So you don't have to tell all the specifics,
No, I
but maybe
can.
just a couple.
It's a good question. So I was gambling a lot. I was participating in risky sexual behavior. Laura, if you're listening, this was before we were married. Or before we were in a relationship, I should say. I was spending a significant amount of money. So part of the estate and everything is that, money gets released and everything else. And, I was trying to fill the void that I felt when my dad passed away. I was taking friends out to do stuff, whether that be and I'll just say at gentlemen's clubs or gambling or whatever. I was doing all of the things that I would not recommend anybody in recovery do. And I don't know if the camera can see me, I was this close away from probably picking up a drink.
Wow.
I wasn't prepared for that. My coping mechanisms weren't there. And
how did you reel yourself in from these behaviors? What did someone kind of intervene? Did your friends get together and were they like, Ben, get it together?
I think time. I think that I had to go. I mean, I used to share this a lot, when I was, more recent. But I am very thankful that I didn't go through all of the money from the estate that I was, inherited, for lack of a better term, because I've heard horror stories about that as well. And people have said, like, I'm surprised you didn't, like, as a way to cope. But I would say again, time. Friends and support on trying to pull myself out of that place. But I don't know that there was anything that anybody could say or do that would have probably changed my outlook at that point. I'm very thankful I did meet Laura around that time, probably a little bit after that. Laura's probably going to kill me. Laura's my wife today, and I don't remember which part of that year, if it was the next when we met. I'm, again, terrible with dates. But I think that also helped me. Was meeting somebody that was in recovery that could help me, process and also kind of look forward to the next chapter in my life.
Wait, sorry. Laura was in recovery?
Yeah, Laura's in recovery, yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. And actually the same year, there was a lot of changes in the same year and a half time span. I quit my job at the job that Karen helped me get after treatment.
You had it for a long time.
Yeah, about 5 years.
Oh, I had mine for about 2.5 months.
Yeah, one of the things, someone pointed out to me that I have not, in my job history, I do not jump around a lot. Not that I have a significant job history, but
That's pretty cool, though.
when I was 16 to 21, I was people laugh, but I was a park ranger in the summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I wore like the shorts and the green tee and the green polo shirt, and then I worked in a kitchen for a time period when I was younger. But no, I don't tend to jump around for jobs. But I quit my job and decided that I wanted to go work at the treatment center that saved my life and changed my family's life. And I took a significant pay cut to do that. But I started off as a CA. I was really determined.
What's a CA?
A counselor assistant. And I was really determined during that time that I was going to help more people because I was just all over the place, to be quite frank. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go and help more alcoholics and addicts. And I was also determined at that time to be a clinician.
You must have just stopped actually being a CA when I got there. I came through in November 2016. You must have just literally transitioned to another position.
Yes.
Maybe?
Good with dates.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
so I think I started October 2015. I was working in the other program that Karen had, or has, I should say.
Okay. Got it.
Um,
So then I wouldn't know.
Yeah, and there wasn't really a lot
fancy
of
program.
the fancy program. There wasn't a lot of interchanging the staff members at that
Yes,
time.
I would know nothing about that program because I was scholarship personally, so they don't get scholarship to that program.
Yeah, it was a different experience working in that other program. Actually, I was determined to work at the program that I had gone through at the time. But they were like, no, actually, you have a better demeanor for the higher end one. I was like, oh, okay. And they were probably right, to be honest. I was, I probably could have done both, but I did well with the higher end demographic of patient. And I did that for a time period. And, I'm really grateful, but Karen helped me go back and get my master's degree in business.
That's amazing. Yeah, so they partially pay for school or pay you back?
Yep. So I think it's a program that's still active today, but they paid, I think it was a pretty good portion of the tuition per year. And I had to sign a commitment of employment, after graduating. But they're really generous in that. And they're really supportive, and they created a work schedule, I should say, around my online school schedule. So
That's so cool.
So that I could do it.
So you went back to school for?
Master's in Business Administration, not clinical social work, which is
say.
what I originally thought I was going for.
So you're not a therapist?
I am not, no.
Okay.
I probably, my friend who I work with makes jokes with me that I'm probably a clinician by fire. I am not a clinician by trade.
Right.
So I've learned a lot of clinical skills and clinical know-how throughout my career at Karen, but I am definitely not a clinician not by choice is probably the wrong word, but
Right.
by education.
People say to me all the time, like, you should be a therapist. And I mean, I don't know all the clinical terms by any means, but I just can't go back to school and do it. There's just no way.
Why not?
No. Just the idea of writing. I did a certificate for coaching, and they were like, so the homework is, and it's due, but you could hand it in at the end of the week. I was like the last person to hand it in. But that's incredible that you went back to school and you did that, and you have your master's. And so you worked effectively at that treatment center from 2015 and till 2024.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I grew from, a CA position. And again, I always like to say this because I try to give other people hope, and that if I can, I'm not a shiny crystal ball. If I can do it, anyone else certainly can do it. I am not an exception. I am not anything special. And I say that because it's true. I put in a lot of hard work. But again, like, it was just that. It wasn't that like I did something special to, achieve those things. But I started off as a CA making $16 an hour, which is not far off the 12 that I made at the advertising agency when I first started. But I worked all the way up to an executive role at the treatment center. So, and I held various roles in between then. And it's an amazing experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And,
I know you've helped so many people. I know that for sure.
I try. And that's the biggest gift, more than anything else, is seeing the change in patients and the families, and also seeing the change in our very own staff and helping them grow. That was one big component of what I really appreciated about the treatment center, was watching people grow and watching people, some people at the treatment center have their own story in recovery, or they have a family member that's gone through the process, but in some form or fashion, people seem to always be connected. And then watching them, achieve their own potential, whether that be in education or just skill set or experience through the current role that they have, is amazing.
That is so cool.
And watching them grow, but also then watching them help more patients and families because their skill set or education increases, is just something you can't take away. It's incredible.
That's awesome. What do you do today to stay sober?
So one of the biggest influences that I have today in my life is, so I went to it when I was earlier on in recovery, but I go to it more consistently now, starting about 3 or 4 years ago, is this Tuesday night men's meeting. It is not a sanctioned AA 12-step meeting, but what it is a men's meeting where we can share and talk with one another about what's going on in our lives. And some of the members have been there since the very beginning, so 15, 16 years ago.
Wow.
Some are newcomers, some have been there 8 years. But what I always take away from that meeting is learning about what's going on in other men's lives, and hearing their experience and hearing their struggles, because to be honest with you, they're not very different whether you have a year, 8 years, 5 seconds, in the program. They're not necessarily different. Maybe they appear different, but they're not. If you break them down or look at them from a macro level, they're not. They're all like the same concerns, to some extent.
But what's different? The way you handle it, right? The way you handle it's a little differently. The way you react. What I've noticed in my recovery is my reactions to things have changed dramatically. So, aside from that meeting, what else do you do?
So I definitely meditate and pray every morning. I go to the gym pretty regularly. That helps regulate my anxiety. But I really think it's my perspective that's changed. I was also talking about, before we started, was this podcast I listened to on Stoicism. It's by Ryan Holiday. And Stoicism and the 12 steps really kind of intersect with one another. And what I've taken from that is, again, living moment by moment and day by day. And also, Laura and this other friend that I have, a good friend that I have at work, both joke with me, is that I don't know that anyone, back, when I was in my early 20s, or even probably 5-6 years ago, you probably push all my buttons and I'd panic or have an anxiety attack or freak out or whatever. I think that today, someone would be very hard pressed to get me to be anxious or hit a panic button or get me to really give a big reaction to something. Just because I've learned that sometimes overreacting or reacting too quickly isn't necessarily the best option. And especially in my professional career, I just, a lot of times I can't react that quickly because you might make an incorrect response or an incorrect decision, and you need that couple minutes to think through it. If you make a snap decision, it could, potentially change an outcome.
Right, and affects multiple people.
Correct. So, but yeah, I think it's just the way that I process things. Yeah. And I also have really learned, and this is over the course of the last couple of years, and the meeting has really helped me with this, the men's meeting, is not internalizing things so much and not taking things so personally. Remembering that I am not the center of most people's attention. Maybe if my daughter Winnie's, but I am not that special. And I don't know that I ever really thought that, but I think that I probably in some ways thought that they're looking at me. And in the last couple of years, I've learned no, they're not looking at me. Right. They're looking at everything that's going around, but
they're looking at themselves mostly.
Exactly.
Everyone's really worried about their own self, how they look, whether people are looking at them.
Yep.
It's funny, we all worry about the same things.
Absolutely. And I've let go of that. In the last year, actually, it's been a year. January 1st of 24, so 23, I deleted all social media. Not that I had that much to begin with, to be fair, but and I've gone a year and 2 months without social media.
Wow.
And it has changed. So to be fair, though, I still go on YouTube and watch the little shorts.
Well, I would hope so. You have to watch our podcast.
And I go on the podcast and do stuff like that. But one of the things that I looked at the beginning of last year was that internally, I did a lot of comparisons to other people. And I would see things on social media and be like, oh, I want to be like this person, or I got to be better than this person, rather than just being like, no, Ben, you're okay with yourself and you're okay being you. And so I wanted to run a test last January and say, how long can I go without having this? And I will say that my life has, and again, I'm not saying that anyone else needs to do this, but for me personally, it changed my life and how I viewed other people. I wasn't looking at people as such a comparison or like, what do you have? What don't I have? Or what do I have? What you don't have? And it really shifted my perspective on gratitude, and being present for other people and not like immediately seeing someone and evaluating like what's going on.
I love that.
It just, I don't know, like it's hard to describe. I don't know why it changed so much for me, but it just made a huge difference that I just can't, I have a hard time putting into words.
There's probably a lot of psychology that goes into explaining
Yeah.
it, but like I completely get that because I'm all over social media. I have to be to just post stuff,
Yeah.
and like I'll get stuck in a loop of watching stuff, and then after my brain just feels different, and then I'll do something like this with you guys, and I'll kind of get some life back in a way. It's so hard to describe, but like you stop worrying about what other people think. You stop comparing when you take a break from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've been doing social media now with this podcast and more of my own social media. I actually just did a reel or whatever, and I said like, if you knew me before a month ago, I probably didn't post anything. And everything I follow on social media is pug related. So like,
I love it.
I follow pugs. So people would be like, I have to get off social media. It's really not good for me. I'm like, or you could do what I've done, which is follow pugs
Yep.
and other dogs, which really is so fun and funny. But I also follow people, and I've noticed that sometimes, especially now with trying to learn social media more to use it as a tool, I am getting lost, and I find myself like, and I'm in like Russia, and I'm like, how did I get here? Hold on. And I have to like press back, and I've gone through 1,000,001 profiles to get to Russia, you know? And so I find it really funny that you say that, but although that's not something I can do right now or don't want to do right now, because I do want to really further this, but I'm sure that's incredible, and that's a great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think social media, to be honest, is a great way to advertise, market, to brand. I think that social media has come a long way. The one thing that I am fearful is the personal accounts, like the things that I see on the news where people are comparing to one another. And really this has come up for me because now I have Winnie, my daughter. And I worry about and again, I have a long time to worry about this, but
Right.
I worry about what that's going to look like. I see like people on Facebook, like, there's the bullying, there's the comparisons, there's the pictures, there's all this stuff. And then you got the lack of a better term, the creepy people.
Right. There's a lot. It's a lot going on.
And it worries me a little bit. But no, I see it on YouTube, and they get me still to this day, even though I don't have social media. I'll see it on like Spotify for podcasts or YouTube for videos or the shorts or whatever. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. I want to do that. Like, it does work.
Right. Right.
So I do like it for that. And keeping up to date with what's going on.
So tell me this, if you can go back and talk to your younger self, what age would it be, and what would you say?
So that's a good question. I think I would tell my younger self that it's going to be okay, and that life has a funny way of showing that. That's an interesting question, because some people will ask me that from time to time, especially newcomers that they meet, and they're like, would you change things the way that they happened? And to be quite honest, I wouldn't.
Yeah, me too.
I wouldn't be in this place today or tomorrow or, whenever in the future without all the experiences that I've had. I wouldn't have Winnie. I wouldn't have Laura. I wouldn't be sitting here with you and get the opportunity to do this. I wouldn't have your friendship. I wouldn't have had the chance to meet you, to meet the pug. I mean, there's just so many things that that are great today. And there are, to be clear too, for anyone, in recovery, like, I don't want to make it seem like it's all sunshine and roses. It certainly isn't. Again, as I said before, I've had more struggles or conflicts or, things that have happened, that haven't gone my way. But again, it makes me who I am today. And I'm sure that there'll be the good, the bad, and the ugly moving forward too. and that's okay.
I like to think of it as they weren't supposed to go your way to begin with.
Yeah.
You know. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you being here, and let's hug it out.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Me too.
Sweet.